3,200 employees and 5 studios. That is what Microsoft just cut from its gaming division in a single announcement, 2 years after the first major wave of closures that reshaped what Xbox meant as a platform. Not quietly, not in the staggered disclosure companies use when they want the total to accumulate slowly across multiple news cycles. All of it confirmed at once in the summer of 2026. For anyone who has watched what Xbox has done with the creative studios, it spent 5 years and tens of billions of dollars acquiring. This announcement lands differently than a standard corporate restructuring. Several of the studios inside Microsoft's orbit were not struggling operations running on aging franchises. Some of them were exactly the kind of creative teams that players and critics pointed to when arguing that Xbox's acquisition strategy was working. The results from those studios were real. The protection those results offered turned out not to be. The historical record makes the present announcement harder to separate from a pattern that first became visible in 2024. In May of that year, Microsoft closed Tango Gameworks 1 month after Hi-Fi Rush had won multiple Game of the Year awards across major outlets and stood as one of the most critically acclaimed releases Xbox had produced in years. Arcane Austin closed in the same announcement, a studio that had made Prey, which the preservation community still cites as one of the most underappreciated first-person games of the last decade. What those closures demonstrated was that critical success and subscription catalog value were not the same measurement, and that only one of them protected studios inside Microsoft's cost structure. Today, the broader Arcane entity finds itself caught in this new wave as well, 2 years after its Austin branch was already gone. This brings us to the Game Pass revenue model, which is the underlying economic engine that most coverage of Xbox studio decisions completely glosses over. Game Pass is a subscription. Microsoft earns recurring monthly revenue from subscribers, and the metric that drives retention is whether the catalog is large and refreshing enough to justify the monthly fee. The commercial logic for a studio operating inside that model is structurally different from the logic for a studio releasing games into a direct sale market. In a direct sale market, a critically acclaimed game that sells 3 million copies generates revenue that flows back to the publisher in proportion to units sold. In a subscription model, that same game enters the catalog as a content addition. The subscriber has already paid for through their monthly fee. The per-user revenue attached to any single title is a fraction of what direct sales would produce, and the studio's contribution to the business is evaluated against subscriber retention numbers, rather than against whether the game was worth making. That is the narrative the acquisition announcements always led with. The talent, the creative identity, the potential. The actual financial calculus applied to each studio's continued existence runs on a different set of numbers. Xbox leadership made this explicit in the announcement. In a typical year, the company lost 64 cents for every dollar it invested in these studios. That figure, disclosed publicly rather than buried in a filing footnote, is the clearest statement Microsoft has made about why the acquisition and hold model was not working at the scale they had built it. Those numbers are not the ones that appeared in the press releases when the deals were signed. The word divestiture in today's announcement is doing different work than the word closure, and the distinction matters for the teams involved. Microsoft's own framing is worth taking at face value here. The company acknowledged directly that it is not the best home for every type of studio. That admission, attached to a restructuring announcement rather than appearing in a public relations campaign, is a significant departure from the language that surrounded every acquisition over the previous 5 years. What it is describing is a structural mismatch. Studios built around creative risk and original intellectual property do not thrive inside a subscription catalog model, calibrated around franchise volume and subscriber retention figures. The outcomes in this announcement reflect that mismatch rather than a single verdict applied equally to everyone affected. Compulsion games and Double Fine are gaining full independence and retaining their intellectual property, meaning the games those studios make in the future will belong to the studios that make them. Ninja Theory and Undead Labs are moving toward new corporate parents, rather than operating independently. The people inside those studios, and the ones in the fifth operation caught in the same announcement, are in a fundamentally different position than the teams at Tango Gameworks and Arcane Austin were in 2024, where the decision was already final before the public statement was drafted. Divestiture is not survival, but it is a different outcome than closure, and the industry will be watching to see which of these studios reaches the other side of the process with their team and their projects intact. What divestiture and closure share is the same underlying conclusion: that Microsoft has decided these operations do not fit the structure it is building toward, and that structure has become increasingly readable over the last 2 years. Microsoft is organizing its gaming business around its largest franchises and around the infrastructure of Game Pass, rather than around a diverse portfolio of creative studios. The acquisition of Activision Blizzard, which closed in late 2023, added Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, and Diablo to a lineup that already included Minecraft, Halo, and Forza. Against that catalog, a studio producing a well-reviewed original game is solving a different problem than the one Microsoft is now most focused on. The scale of the Activision Blizzard acquisition also created a cost structure that smaller creative studios cannot offset. 3,200 jobs cut is partly a financial correction to a balance sheet that absorbed one of the most expensive acquisitions in entertainment history, and now needs to demonstrate returns that the acquired catalog can actually justify. The broader signal for anyone watching the mid-tier development space is not abstract. Microsoft spent years positioning its acquisition strategy as a creative expansion of what Xbox could offer players. The studios it brought in were described as teams with strong identities and the freedom to pursue original ideas under the financial backing of a major publisher. What the last 2 years of restructuring have demonstrated is that financial backing from a major publisher comes with the financial expectations of a major publisher, and those expectations are calibrated to the publisher's overall revenue model, not to the creative output of any individual team inside it. A studio that produces a good game inside a subscription catalog and a studio that makes something that does not connect are solving the same problem from the platform holder's perspective. Neither move the subscriber number in a way that justifies the ongoing operational cost. That is not a judgment about the games. It is a description of what the model rewards and what it does not. 64 cents lost for every dollar invested. Microsoft put that number in writing. 3,200 people are living inside what that number means, and 5 studios are now finding out in practice what it costs when the math stops working in your favor.